ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste my dear friends. This is third video on the Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi's clarification of all the doubts in detail about self-enquiry. Bhagwan has dealt all the factors, minute factors, subtle factors in a very detailed way. I start this video with the mind's origin is in the heart. That which rises as I in this body is the mind. If one inquires as to where in the body the thought I rises first, one would discover that it rises in the heart. That is the place of the mind's origin. If one inquires as to where in the body the thought I rises first, one would discover that it rises in the heart. That is the place of the mind's origin. It is true that the throat is stated to be the location of the mind, the face or the heart of the intellect, the navel of the memory, and the heart or sarvanga of the egoity, though differently stated. Thus yet for the aggregate of these, that is the mind or internal organ, the location is the heart alone. This is conclusively declared in the scriptures. I ask you to observe where the I arises in your body, but it is not really quite correct to say that the I arises from and merges in the chest at the right side. The heart is another name for reality, and this is neither inside nor outside the body. There can be no in or out for it, since it alone is. I do not mean by heart any physiological organ or any plexus or nerves or anything like that. But so long as a man identifies himself with the body or thinks he is in the body, he is advised to see where in the body the I thought arises and merges again. It must be the heart at the right side of the chest, since every man of whatever race and religion and in whatever language he may be speaking points to the right side of the chest to indicate himself when he says I. This is so all over the world, so that must be the place. And by keenly watching the emergence of the I thought on waking and its subsidence on going to sleep, one can see that it is in the heart on the right side. As instruments for knowing the objects, the sense organs are outside, and so they are called outer senses. And the mind is called the inner sense because it is inside. But the distinction between inner and outer is only with reference to the body. In truth, there is neither inner or outer. The mind's nature is to remain pure like ether. What is referred to as the heart or the mind is the collocation of the elements of phenomenal existence that appear as inner and outer. So, there is no doubt that all phenomena consisting of names and forms are of the nature of mind alone. All that appear outside are in reality inside and not outside. It is in order to teach this that in the Vedas also all have been described as of the nature of the heart. What is called the heart is no other than Brahma. The nature of the ego self, Ahankara or Jiva. Ego is non-existent. Otherwise, you would be two instead of one. You, the ego, and you, the self. You are a single, indivisible whole. The ego or separate soul is a concept. God, the world, the mind, desires, action, sorrow, and all other things are all concepts. The ego self does not exist at all. The ego and the mind are the same. The ego is the root thought from which all other thoughts arise. Between spirit and matter, the self and the body, there is born something which is called the Ahankara, the ego self, Jiva, the living being. Now, what you call yourself is this ego self, which is different from the ever conscious self and from unconscious matter, but which at the same time partakes of the character of both spirit and matter, Chetna and Jada. It comes into being equipped with a form, and as long as it retains a form, it endures. Having a form, it feeds and grows big. But if you investigate it, this evil spirit, which has no form of its own, relinquishes its grip on form and takes to flight. The ego is described as having three bodies: the gross, the subtle, and the causal. But that is only for the purpose of analytical exposition. If the method of inquiry were to depend on the ego's form, you may take it that any inquiry would become altogether impossible, because the forms the ego may assume are lesion. Therefore, for purposes of jnana vichara, you have to proceed on the basis that the ego has but one form, namely that of aham vritti. This inert body does not say I. Reality consciousness does not emerge between the two and limited to the measure of the body. Something emerges as I. It is this that is known as Chit Jada Granthi, the note between the conscious and the inert, and also as bondage, soul, subtle body, ego, samsara, mind, and so forth. From the functional point of view, the form, activity, or whatever else you may call it, it is immaterial since it is evanescent. The ego has one and only one characteristic. The ego functions as the node between the self, which is the pure consciousness, and the physical body, which is inert and insentient. The ego is therefore called the Chit Jada Granthi. In your investigation into the source of Aham Vritti, you take the essential Chit aspect of the ego, and for this reason, the enquiry must lead to the realization of the pure consciousness of the self. For him who is immersed in the bliss of the self, arising from the extinction of the ego, what remains to be accomplished, he is not aware of anything as other than the self. Who can apprehend his state? The nature of the I thought or Aham Vritti. The mind is merely thoughts. Of all thoughts, the thought I is the root. Therefore, the mind is only the thought I. Of all the thoughts that arise in the mind, the I thought is the first. It is only after the rise of this that the other thoughts arise. It is after the appearance of the first personal pronoun that the second and third personal pronouns appear. Without the first personal pronoun, there will not be the second and third. The ego is described as having three bodies: the gross, the subtle, and the causal. But that is only for the purposes of analytical exposition. If the method of enquiry were to depend on the ego's form, you may take it that any enquiry would become altogether impossible, because the forms the ego may assume are lesion. Therefore, for purposes of jnana vichara, you have to proceed on the basis that the ego has but one form, namely that of aham vritti. To say I am not this or I am that, there must be the I. This I only This I is only the ego or the I thought. After the rising up of this I thought, all other thoughts arise. The I thought is therefore the root thought. If the root is pulled out, all others are at the same time uprooted. Therefore, seek the root I. Question yourself, who am I? Find out its source. Then all these will vanish and the pure self will remain ever. Thoughts alone constitute the mind, and for all thoughts, the base or source is the I thought. I is the mind. If we go inward, questing for the source of the I topples down. This is the jnana enquiry. The ego's phenomenal existence is transcended when you dive into the source wherefrom arises the aham vritti. That which rises as I in this body is the mind. If one inquires as to where in the body the thought I rises first, one would discover that it rises in the heart. That is the place of the mind's origin. Even if one thinks constantly, I, one will be led to that place. Of all the thoughts that arise in the mind, The I thought is the first. It is only after the rise of this thought that the other thoughts arise. It is after the appearance of the first personal pronoun that the second and third personal pronouns appear. Without the first personal pronoun, there will not be the second and third. The word ahem is itself very suggestive. The two letters of the word, namely A and HA, are the first and the last letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. The suggestion intended to be conveyed by the word is that it comprises all. How? Because ahem signifies existence itself. Although the concept of I-ness or I amness is by usage known as ahem vritti. It is not really a vritti like the other vrittis of the mind, because unlike the other vrittis, which have no essential interrelation, the ahem vritti is equally and essentially related to each and every vritti of the mind. Without the ahem vritti, there can be no other vritti. But the ahem vritti can subside by itself without depending on any other vritti of the mind. The ahem vritti is therefore fundamentally different from other vrittis. So then, the search for the source of the ahem vritti is not merely the search for the basis of one of the forms of the ego, but for the very source itself from which arises the I amness. In other words, the quest for and the realization of the source of the ego in the form of ahem vritti necessarily implies the transcendence of the ego in every one of its possible forms. Vasanas, latent tendencies. All the age-long vasanas, impressions, carry the mind outwards and turn it to external objects. All such thoughts have to be given up and the mind turned inward. For that effort is necessary for most people. Vasanas, which do not obstruct self-realization, remain after self-realization. In Yoga Vasishtha, two classes of vasanas are distinguished, those of enjoyment and those of bondage. The former remain even after mukti is attained, but the latter are destroyed by it. Attachment is the cause of binding vasanas, but enjoyment without attachment does not bind and continues even in sahaja. There are not two minds, one good and the other evil. The mind is only one. It is the residual impressions that are of two kinds, auspicious and inauspicious. When the mind is under the influence of auspicious impressions, it is called good, and when it is under the influence of inauspicious impressions, it is regarded as evil. Only one who is free from all the latent tendencies, vasanas, is says. That being so, how can the tendencies of karma affect him who is entirely unattached to activity. Such an experience of identity as the young Ramana Maharshi had does not always or even normally result in liberation. It comes to a seeker, but the inherent tendencies of the ego cloud it over again. The miracle was that in the Maharshi's case, there was no clouding over, no relapse into ignorance. He remained thenceforward in constant awareness of identity with the oneself. Good and bad are found eventually to be only relative terms. Self-enquiry is found to be no more than the discarding of vasanas. So long as one single vasana remains, good or bad, so long must we remain unrealized. Before I came to India, I had read of such people as Edward Carpenter, Tennyson, and many more who had flashes of what they called cosmic consciousness. These words are expressed by A.W. Chadwick. I asked Bhagwan, Sri Ramana Maharshi about this. Was it possible that once having gained self-realization for the individual to lose it again? Certainly it was. To support this view, Bhagwan took up a copy of Kevala Navanita and told the interpreter to read a page of it to me. In the early stages of sadhana, this was quite possible and even probable. So long as the least desire or tie was left, a person would be pulled back again into the phenomenal world, he explained. After all, it is our vasanas that prevent us from always being in our natural state, and vasanas were not got rid of all of a sudden by a flash of cosmic consciousness. One may have worked them out in a previous existence, leaving a little to be done in the present life, but in any case, they must first be destroyed. I am the body is the primary delusion. The concept I am the body is the primal ignorance. It is known as the firm knot of the heart. It gives rise to the concepts of existence and non-existence. If there is no trace of it at all, everything will be found to be the reality of the Supreme Absolute Being. The body consciousness is the wrong I. Give up this body consciousness. It is done by seeking the source I. Find out who this I is. Seeking its source, it will vanish. The body does not say I am. It is you who says I am the body. Find out who this I is. Seeking its source, it will vanish. So long as there is the idea that the body is the self, one cannot be a realizer of truth, whoever he might be. The thought I am the body is the string on which are threaded diverse thoughts like beads. The thought I am the body is the string on which are threaded divergent thoughts like beads. Apart from the statement in the Veda that wherever there is body, there is misery, this is also the direct experience of all people. Therefore, one should inquire into one's true nature, which is ever bodiless, and one should remain as such. Enquiry is the means to gaining that state of eternal bliss. The cross body, which is composed of the seven humors, dhatus, am not the five cognitive sense organs which the senses of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, which apprehend their respective objects which sound, touch, color, taste, and odor. I am not the five cognitive sense organs which the organs of speech, locomotion, grasping, excretion, and procreation, which have as their respective functions speaking, moving, grasping, excreting, and enjoying. I am not the five vital ears, prana, etc., which perform respectively the five functions of in breathing, etc. I am not even the mind which thinks. I am not the nescience too, which is endowed only with the residual impressions of objects and in which there are no objects and no functioning. I am not. After negating all of the above mentioned as not this, that awareness which alone remains that I am, the nature of awareness, the self, is existence, consciousness, bliss. Every man admits his own existence and does not need a mirror to prove it to him. Existence is awareness, which is the negation of ignorance. Then why does man suffer? Because he imagines himself other than what he in reality is. For example, the body, this, that, and the other. I am Gopal, son of Parshuram, father of Natishan, etc. In reality, he is the intelligent I am alone, stripped of qualities and superimpositions of names and forms. He must hold on to that existence that he sees in dreamless sleep, that lone being Cavalier, even when he is in the waking state. The man of wisdom simply is I am that I am. Sums up the whole truth. The method is summed up by be still and know that I am God. What does stillness mean? Cessation of thinking, which is the universe of forms, colors, qualities, time, space, all concepts and percepts, whatever. It is on the gross body that the other bodies subsist. In the false belief of the form, I am the body, are included all the three bodies consisting of the five seats, and destruction of the false belief of selfhood in the gross body is itself the destruction of the false belief of selfhood in the other body. So, inquiry is the means to removal of the false belief of selfhood in all the three bodies. To those who have not realized the self, as well as to those who have, the word I refers to the body, but with this difference that for those who have not realized, the I is confined to the body, whereas for those who have realized the self within the body, the I shines as the limitless self. The reality of yourself cannot be questioned. The self is the primal reality. The ordinary person unconsciously takes reality to be their true inner reality plus everything which has come into their consciousness as pertaining to themselves, the body, etc. This they have to unlearn. Actions such as going and coming belong only to the body. And so, when one says, I went, I came, it amounts to saying that the body is I. But can the body be said to be the consciousness I? Since the body was not before it was born, is made up of the five elements, is non-existent in the state of deep sleep and becomes a corpse when dead. Can this body, which is inert like a log of wood, be said to shine as I? Therefore, the I consciousness, which at first arises in respect of the body, is referred to variously as self conceit, Tarbodham, egoity, ahankara, nescience, avidya, maya, impurity, mala, and individual soul, jiva. Can we remain without inquiring into this? Is it not for our redemption through inquiry that all the scriptures declare that the destruction of self-conceit is release, mukti. Therefore, making the corpse body remain as a corpse and not even uttering the word I, one should inquire keenly thus. Now, what is it that rises as I? Then there would shine in the heart a kind of wordless illumination of the form I, I. That is, there would shine of its own accord the pure consciousness which is unlimited and one, the limited and the many thoughts having disappeared. If one remains quiescent without abandoning that experience, the egoity, the individual sense of the form, I am the body, will be totally destroyed, and at the end the final thought which the I form also will be quenched like the fire that burns camphor. The great sages and scriptures declare that this alone is release. The nexus of the body and the self is called the granthi. 1. It is only by this connection with the self that one is aware of the body. This body is insentient. The self is pure awareness. The connection between the two is deduced through the intellect. O child, enveloped by the diffused light of pure awareness, the body functions. Owing to non-apprehension of the world in sleep, swoon, and so on, the location of the self has to be inferred. Even as subtle forces like the electric current pass through visible wires, the light of awareness flows through a nadi too. In the body, when the effulgent light of awareness shines in Atma Nadi 3, alone nothing else shines except the self. Anything that appears before such a jnani has no separate existence. He knows the self clearly as the ignorant one, his body. He for whom the Atma. 4. Alone shines within, without, and everywhere as clearly as objects to the ignorant is called one who has cut the nexus. The nexus is twofold. One, the bond of the nadis dwells in one nadi alone. The bond between awareness and the body is sundered and the light abides in the self. As a heated iron ball appears as a ball of fire, this body, heated in the fire of self-enquiry, shines as the self. The old Vasanas, 5. Pertaining to the body, mind, and so on are destroyed. Being free from body consciousness, one never has the sense of doership. Since such a one has no sense of doership, his karma, 6. It is said, is completely destroyed, as nothing but the self exists. No doubts arise from for him. Once the knot is cut, one is never bound again. This is considered the state of power supreme and peace supreme. Number 1, note. Number 2, nerve. Number 3, according to the free John, the Amrita Nadi is the form of reality founded in the heart and terminated in the aperture of the head. It is the cycle or form of unqualified enjoyment that contains and is the source of all things, all bodies, realms, experiences, states, and levels of being. Its basic nature is unqualified enjoyment or bliss. It is all powerful existence or unqualified presence. It is your very nature at this moment, and it is experienced as such when true understanding arises and becomes the radical premise of conscious life. The child of God, soul or self. Number 5, tendency. Number 6, the residue of acts in which he or she is implicated as a result of the law of cause and effect. So I complete this video here, and the next video number 4 will start with the heading Turn the Mind Inward. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, comment and share the video. Subscribe the channel. Namaskar.